Bet you didn't think I'd be talking about this again, huh?
Plasma!
Just when I thought I was done talking about Earthworm Jim for a while, something kinda cool happened, and now I can't help but mention it. The Great Earthworm Jim Race has been found.
The what?
Okay, hang on, let me back up. I gotta lay the groundwork here for you. Let's go back to 1994, because how many of you have heard of the Sega Channel? This was an ambitious experiment for the 90s, and one of the earliest examples of sending video games directly into the home. From 1994 to 1998, Sega Genesis owners could subscribe to the Sega Channel on top of their current cable package and gain access to dozens of games, which would rotate out every month. With the use of a special cartridge, games would be downloaded over a coaxial cable, and these included a few which famously never released on cartridge in North America. I'm talking about games like Treasure's Alien Soldier, Game Freak's Pulse Man, and of course Mega Man The Wily Wars. If you lived in North America, Sega Channel was the only way you were realistically going to play some of these, and to a lot of Sega fans, that alone made it worth the subscription cost. Unfortunately, the Sega Channel launched far too late in the life of the Genesis, and it was overshadowed by the next console generation, which began in 1995. Despite only running for 3.5 years, Sega Channel has its place in video game history, as it helped lay the foundation for all the digital storefronts that are commonplace in game consoles today. But what does this all have to do with Earthworm Jim? Well, in addition to having both the first and second games available to play, the Sega Channel also hosted an Earthworm Jim contest in 1995, one which, until very recently, we had very little documentation on. The contest was run in conjunction with the release of the Earthworm Jim toy line, as well as the special edition of the first game. Called the Great Earthworm Jim Race, the contest involved a modified version of the first game with an increase in difficulty, and those who reached the secret room at the end fastest would be rewarded with prizes. Most of these included action figures from the Earthworm Jim toy line, as well as the official Earthworm Jim art book, but the first one to reach the end would win a trip to LA to visit Shiny Entertainment's headquarters, so it really was a race to see who would win that grand prize. And until recently, that was all we knew about the Great Earthworm Jim Race. However, that all changed in December 2025 when the Video Game History Foundation managed to recover more than 140 Sega Channel ROMs, including system menus, unreleased versions of games, modified Sega Channel versions of retail games, and so much more. I'll go ahead and link to the Video Game History Foundation's video down in the description, in case you're interested in how they managed to find and back up all these lost ROMs, because that's interesting enough in its own right, but I'm here for Earthworm Jim first and foremost. Hey, the Earthworm Jim fanbase is so starved for new content, we have to take what we can get. I've always been curious what was changed for this version of the game, ever since I saw it mentioned in passing on the first game's Wikipedia page, but thanks to the effort of everyone at the Video Game History Foundation, it's finally time to play it. Unfortunately, the only footage we have of the game in the actual Sega Channel menu, at least to my knowledge, is this VHS footage. I went through all of the US Sega Channel menu ROMs, and I can't find a mention of the Great Earthworm Jim Race in any of them. It's not a huge deal though, it just goes over the rules of the race and emphasizes the difficulty of this version of the game. It also shows this unique artwork of Jim in a Hawaiian shirt that I've never seen before. Pretty cool stuff. Now that we have the game ROM, it's finally time to play what very well might be the hardest version of Earthworm Jim ever created. And in this era of EverDrives and flash cartridges, I'm gonna play it on real hardware. Grab yourself a good long coax cable and make sure to have your landline ready at the end, because I'm gonna beat the Great Earthworm Jim Race. When you boot into the game, you might as well be playing the retail version, because there's nothing different on the title screen. Your first sign that something's amiss is when you head into the options screen. The difficulty is permanently locked on difficult. Already, this game is living up to the Sega Channel description. Starting off in New Junk City just like normal, I can see right away that we start with only 500 rounds of ammo instead of the usual 1,000. Not only that, but ammo pickups now only give you an additional 150 rounds instead of 250. This is the main factor that makes this version of Earthworm Jim so difficult, and ammo conservation needs to be your main priority the entire time. It's all too easy to get too trigger happy and find yourself having to wait for your plasma blaster to recharge. So I hope you know where all those secret areas are, because you'll need to explore the level and scavenge as much ammunition as possible. Fortunately, New Junk City has not been modified in any way, so you can wander all around the level and grab every ammo power-up that you could in the retail version. You can even make your way up to the toilet warp point, and it still works, though I really don't recommend doing that since it's far better to explore and look for items. Since we're playing on difficult, the fight with the trash can boss is a frustrating pain since he moves so fast you barely have any time to get out of the way. And with ammunition already being in short supply, you might want to just reset if you can't beat him the first time around. At the end, we fight Chuck and move on to the next level. Just like the retail version, it's time for Andy Asteroids, however this is clearly not the first Andy Asteroids level. The game seems to start you off on one of the final asteroid levels, as the high difficulty once again shows itself through frantic patterns to avoid, and frequent rocket boosts that Psychro won't hesitate to use. It feels like I'm headed to Buttville at the end of the game, but nope, we're still very early on here. Next up is What the Heck, which plays out nearly the same as the retail version. Just like before, make it a priority to conserve ammo as much as possible, and seek out those secret areas to hoard as much as you can. As I'm making my way through the level here, it does feel like a few items are in different locations or have been removed entirely. I'm not completely sure on that, but it would make sense as it's yet another way to make the game harder. Midway through, we fight the evil snowman as to be expected, and then the level continues as normal through the second half. Not a whole lot to say here. It's What the Heck, so you're probably already familiar with it. Even the fight with Evil the Cat is here, and it's the same as before. Not a whole lot to comment on so far. Once again, it's time for Andy Asteroids, and this is definitely the final asteroid level from the retail version. Stay on your toes to dodge the incoming asteroids, but if you've played the normal version of the game to death, then you probably won't have much trouble with this. Just keep in mind that the asteroids still deal damage to you here, even though you can't see your health percentage. If you die, your ammo is back at 500, so all your ammo farming is wasted and you might as well start over. Just an extra something to keep your anxiety going while playing this. Next though, you won't find Down the Tubes or Snot a problem, as we've skipped straight to level 5, which makes the level name even funnier. In the special edition, it's level 6, and here it's level 3. It seems that level 5 has a really hard time actually being level 5. Anyway, the level itself isn't changed a whole lot from what we're already used to. I noticed this cache of health that I'm pretty sure isn't there in the normal version, but that's it for this section. Once you get past the ball trap, which does as good a job as ever of eating through your precious ammo, is where things begin to change. Before Jim's feet can even touch the floor, you'll get warped away into Who Turned Out the Lights. Normally this is a somewhat hidden area that some players might not even see unless they were to jump in the right spot, but now it's become a required part of the playthrough. As far as I can tell, this section is exactly the same as the retail version, but you should still be careful as you'll probably be running low on ammo and health the whole time. Just don't forget to jump over the giant monster when the time is right at the end. With Who Turned Out the Lights completed, it's time to warp back to level 5 and finish the rest of the...
Groovy!
Never mind. Not fighting the chicken this time, I guess. Well, after that abrupt ending, you won't find any more Andy Asteroids. Instead, the final challenge is For Pete's Sake. And challenge is a fitting way to describe this, as For Pete's Sake was already a pretty challenging level in the first place. But here, it's elevated to become the bane of any Earthworm Jim fan's existence. To start, the objective in the stage is still the same, to guide Peter Puppy to the end by whipping him over obstacles and shooting the enemies that get in the way. What makes this even harder is once again the limitations this game places on the plasma blaster. You depend on the blaster in this stage to clear out most of the hazards that could hurt Peter and end up costing you valuable health. But with the extremely limited ammunition you're given, it's all too likely you'll run out of bullets and be impatiently waiting for the blaster to recharge. This is a huge problem when you encounter a meteor shower. Yep, they're still here, and they will eat up a majority of your ammo each time you run into one. Sometimes it's better to just tank the damage and only shoot to keep Peter in place, just to conserve ammunition. I know it should be common sense, but please try not to die in this version of the game. Since your ammo count carries over to the next stage as long as you don't die, you can hoard as much as possible in preparation for the challenge ahead. You're gonna screw up, a lot if you're anything like me, but it's not impossible. It just feels that way. Just when you thought you were getting close to the end, the game decides to mess with you even more by removing the first house and forcing you to take the longer, more advanced route. And in place of the first house, yep, there's another meteor shower. I swear, this game wants Jim dead. I was never the best at getting through the advanced route, and to make matters worse, it still has no checkpoints after the stage's normal ending. So if you mess up here, you're going back to the beginning of the advanced section. Even the most seasoned Earthworm Jim veterans are going to need a couple attempts with this one. I sure did, and I almost gave up. But after many more attempts, I was finally able to make it to Peter's house. And I'm denying him entry after all he put me through. Later, loser. But hang on a second, even though there's no more Andy Asteroids, we still have to fight Psychro for some reason. Be really careful here, because the arena has been modified slightly, and by that I mean it has bottomless pits now. My first time getting here, I started running because of muscle memory and ran right to my death. Psychro seems a lot more aggressive here than in the normal version of the game. He's persistent and fires that hook way more than I remember. But with all that said, he's a total pushover, as one whip is all it takes to send him running. One hit. That's all. No idea if this is a programming oversight or if it was done on purpose, but hey, after for Pete's sake, I'll take it. And at last, here's our secret room with all the info we need to claim our prize, about 30 years too late. See, this is how you know that this was the 90s. You could never get away with something like this today. Within 5 minutes of the game coming out, the number, the password, all that stuff would be out on the internet for everyone to see. It was a simpler time, and arguably a better time for gaming. And in true Earthworm Jim fashion, the secret word is... If you ask me, the secret word should have been, well done. But hey, Earthworm Jim 2 wasn't out yet, so I guess that wouldn't have worked. So yeah, that's the Great Earthworm Jim Race. Pretty short altogether, but it's nice to be able to play this after being lost media for 30 years. There isn't much of a reason to play the Great Earthworm Jim Race nowadays over the full version of the game, unless you're an Earthworm Jim diehard or you just want to give yourself a serious challenge. You can tell they made this specifically for people who mastered the game and played it front to back multiple times. I've been playing Earthworm Jim for over 20 years, and I still had some trouble getting to the end here. The biggest challenge is how badly they nerfed the Plasma Blaster. Ammo conservation forces you to change up how you play the game instead of firing around like a madman. Adopting a more defensive approach and whipping wherever you can will definitely help. But I can't emphasize this enough. Try not to die. Keep that ammo count as high as possible, and maybe you'll be able to get to the end and claim your non-existent prize. I also want to mention that in addition to the Great Earthworm Jim Race, a few other Jim-related ROMs were recovered. These include the Sega Channel demo version, which is just the first 2 levels of the retail version, as well as 2 volumes of game hints. These are brief sections of pre-programmed gameplay that show you how to get to hidden areas or beat certain bosses. Not very useful nowadays, but back in 1995 these would have been insanely helpful. This is the precursor to all the video game walkthroughs we see on YouTube today, and they're kinda neat to watch, especially on real hardware. I can almost trick myself into thinking I traveled back 30 years just sitting here. Almost. And there you have the Great Earthworm Jim Race. I know it didn't make for the longest video, but I thought it was an interesting piece of Earthworm Jim history, and I wanted to talk about it. Besides, I'm starting to think that some of you view me as the Earthworm Jim guy, so I would have had to talk about this at some point. Major thanks to everyone at the Video Game History Foundation who had a hand in recovering these ROMs. Another piece of video game history has been saved. And now, we get to dive in and check them all out. As usual, I appreciate you so much for watching, but now it's time to see what else we got in here. What? Speaking of lost media,